Welcome, Mark, and thank you for staying with us. This is We on Wild as One. We're glad you're watching. I'm Eric Njoka. This is what happened today. President Donald Trump says the U.S. will impose a 25% tariff on all imports from any country that buys oil or gas from Venezuela. The move would mean a sharp rise in levies on goods from China and India, two of Caracas's biggest oil buyers.
Operasyonu üzerinden milletimizi provoke etmeye kalkıştılar.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says protests over the jailing of Istanbul's mayor have turned into a movement of violence, holds the main opposition party accountable for injured police officers and damage to property. Egypt introduces a fresh proposal to revive the ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas. While Hamas responds positively, Israel denies receiving terms. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz says U.S. military campaign of strikes in Yemen has taken out key Houthi leadership, including the group's top missile specialist. This even as U.S. pounds Yemen for the 8th consecutive day. Denmark's Foreign Minister slams planned visit of a U.S. delegation to Greenland as inappropriate and showing an appetite among Americans. U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Usha Vance, the wife of U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, will be traveling to Greenland on Thursday. The Allahabad High Court Bar Association on Monday announced an indefinite strike from Tuesday. These hours after the Supreme Court notified the transfer of Justice Yashwant Verma. Firefighters in South Korea battle deadly wildfires that have been burning for days. Death toll up to 4. Officials say high winds and rising temperatures are hindering efforts to put out the blazes.
Peter Dutton has promised to slash 36,000 jobs from our bloated public service, very similar to what Elon Musk is doing in the US. And Anthony Albanese is making this sound like the worst thing that could possibly happen. Here's the Prime Minister talking about the coalition's plan.
And the idea that Peter Dutton wants to do two things when it comes to public servants. One, he's questioned working from home. But secondly, he's also said, I want you to be at home 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, because he's going to sack 36,000 public servants.
Hang on. Can I just interrupt? I've just learnt from the Prime Minister that unemployed people are not allowed to leave the house. I didn't know that was a thing. They're chained at home.
They're on the house
24/7. No wonder they're unemployed, because they can't go out and go do a job interview.
The funny thing is someone wrote that line for him and thought it was really good. And I'm not sure if it was the delivery that let him down or the line. But then came Finance Minister Katy Gallagher, and she said that if Dutton slashes $36,000 from the public service, it's going to endanger the nation. She said, defending our national interests, delivering AUKUS, maintaining a robust immigration system. That one is funny, a robust immigration system. I'm not sure where she thought that one from.
Well,
looking after our veterans requires funding and requires people. The safety is at risk under Peter Dutton, who is more obsessed with slashing government jobs. The reality is the public service has to be resourced to do the job we want it to do. Now, this, of course, assumes that Peter Dutton's 36,000 jobs gone will sort of just be evenly spread across all departments, including the defence. So she makes it sound like suddenly we're not going to have, submariners to... Well, we don't have submarines, so it doesn't really matter. the thing I thought was brilliant and a total own goal here is in making this statement, Caleb, she talked about the fact that we are, increasing our defence spending as a percentage of GDP to 2.4% over the next decade, which is hardly anything at all.
Yes.
And in addition, if we're cutting public servants from the Defence Forces, isn't it just a couple of weeks ago, Liz, that our Defence Force were unaware a Chinese warship was firing live rounds off the coast of Sydney? So maybe there are some people who, maybe shouldn't be.
And also,
there.
we can't recruit any, speaking of numbers, lady, because you guys outsource the ADF's recruitment to a jolly Swiss company.
And it's interesting that they're using this, like they're treating this public servant issue, the Labor Party, as though it's like a major election issue. We're talking about 36,000 people. There are something like 1 in 7 people in this country who work in the public service, but most of them are at the state level. They're not at the federal level.
Yeah.
But they're trying to tug on those people and make them think like, your number could be up tomorrow, you're going to lose your job. And that's why Labor governments in particular want a big public service, because if you've got to rely on the government for your money, I guess I better vote for the mob that's going to
Trump's cabinet meeting, attended again by Elon Musk, the Tesla boss conceded Doge staff have been receiving death threats.
Just trying to do the right thing for the American taxpayer and for the American people. Just a thank you to the Doge team who are literally getting death threats and being accosted. And these are, a lot of them are just kids. They're just trying to help out, and they're very talented. They could get jobs for millions of dollars a year. Instead, they come here, earn peanuts, and get death.
We began
threats.
in the Middle East, where tensions continue to escalate as the Houthis of Yemen launched a fresh wave of attacks against Israel and the United States. On Sunday, the Houthis claimed responsibility for targeting the Ben Gurion airport near Tel Aviv with a hypersonic ballistic missile. A Houthi military spokesperson in a televised speech announced that the attack briefly disrupted air traffic at the airport. However, Israeli military reported that their air defense systems intercepted the missile before it crossed into Israeli airspace.
The missile force of the Yemeni armed forces targeted Ben Gurion Airport in the occupied Jaffa area with a Palestine II hypersonic ballistic missile. The operation successfully achieved its objective by the grace of God, which led to the suspension of air traffic at the airport for more than half an hour.
Meanwhile, the Houthis also declared that they had engaged American forces in the Red Sea, specifically targeting the USS Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier and other U.S. warships with missiles and drones. Now, in response to the Houthis' attack, Washington also intensified its air campaign against Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. Reports indicate that multiple U.S. airstrikes hit the Yemen airport, a coastal area near the Red Sea, and parts of the Sana'a province, which are key Houthi strongholds. The attack in the capital killed at least 1 person and wounded more than a dozen others.
The Israeli and American enemy targeted a civilian site that was uninhabited and still under construction, resulting in 4 injuries from people passing by, evacuated to the hospital. And until now, there are 5 injured that have been treated at Ibn Sina Hospital, and 13 others have been evacuated to Al Jamhuriya Hospital.
Now, the conflict between the United States forces and the Houthis have significantly impacted global shipping. In fact, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz revealed that the U.S. flagships are now avoiding the Red Sea due to security risk. Rather, they're now opting for a much longer and costlier route around Africa's southern tip.
75% of our U.S. flag shipping now has to go around the southern coast of Africa rather than going through the Suez Canal. The last time one of our destroyers went through the straits there, it was attacked 23 times.
Meanwhile, political discussions on the crisis have intensified. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke along with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday and reaffirmed Washington's commitment to protecting Red Sea shipping routes and supporting Israel's ongoing military operations in Gaza. As the situation remains volatile, both sides are locked in an ongoing cycle of attacks and counterattacks. And as tensions rise, one critical question remains: how far, in fact, will this conflict escalate before it reaches a breaking point?
A grim milestone over the weekend in Gaza. More than 50,000 people have been killed since October of 2023.
The Palestinian Health Ministry says that it is the result of Israel's bombing campaign and ground invasion after the October 7th terror attack by Hamas. That attack on Israel left 1,200 dead. Hamas also took 240 people hostage. Since then, health leaders say the Israel Defense Force has killed at least 50,000 people in Gaza.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his new national security team are planning a major ground offensive in Gaza. The Wall Street Journal is reporting their hope is to capture swaths of land that will allow them to wipe out the militant group Hamas. On Sunday, Israel sent troops into the northern part of the Gaza Strip, as well as to the south around the city of Rafah. Israel also deployed troops to the Netzarim corridor along the Palestinian enclave in a return to an area it had withdrawn from as part of the ceasefire deal. The defense ministry also said it killed Hamas's new prime minister, Ismail Bahoum, over the weekend. Hamas also confirmed that another high-ranking political official was killed in an Israeli airstrike. The Journal says as part of a new battle plan, as Netanyahu and a group of his top aides believe they must defeat Hamas on the battlefield before any political solution in Gaza can be reached. The report indicates the Trump administration's backing of a renewed offensive in Gaza gives them more latitude to carry it out. That backing includes an increased flow of ammunition to Israel. The defense minister said Israel would seize territory in Gaza as long as Hamas continues to hold dozens of hostages that it captured in the initial attack on Israel on October 7, 2023. CBS News is reporting that airstrikes over the weekend killed at least 26 Palestinians. The Gaza Health Ministry announced on Sunday that a total of 50,021 Palestinians have been killed in the war, including 673 since last Tuesday's Israeli bombardment, which ended the ceasefire between the two sides. Critics of the renewed Israeli offensive say that further military action risks the lives of the remaining hostages, believed to be 59 alive and 35 dead. Many also think Israel is war-weary, and Hamas will never be eliminated without a political and diplomatic solution.
All right, let's now head to Washington, D.C., where U.S. President Donald Trump is currently addressing the press at the White House. Let's listen in.
And you have a lot of that. You've found far too much of it. It's a pure fraud. We like to use the words waste and abuse because they sort of sound good, but many of these things are pure fraud. Now, there was a contract that you've heard about where Stacey Abrams got $2 billion just before we took over, and it was a rush to get her the money, and that was environmental, and nobody knows what she was doing. But $2 billion. If you got $2 million, that's a lot. If you got 200,000, that's a lot. But this was $2 billion was given. Lee, do you want to talk about that? And the other one that was even worse?
EPA has now canceled over $22 billion worth of contracts. $2 billion going to this NGO that Stacey Abrams was tied to. They received only $100 in 2023. And then the Biden administration gave them $2 billion. The director of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund saw his former employer get $5 billion. So $20 billion went to just 8 NGOs, and they're all pass-throughs. And then they were giving it to other entities, many of them were pass-throughs. And what you have is all these extra middlemen, they're taking their cut. And the taxpayer ends up getting screwed. They're losing out on all this hard-earned money. They can't afford to have the federal government waste. The partnership with Doge and Elon Musk has been incredible at EPA. Their team is very talented. We wouldn't have been able to do it without them. And of course, this mandate from President Trump to make sure that we identify every last penny, whether we're saving $50,000, $5 million, or $22 billion. We will not rest until every last penny is saved. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to do this for the American public.
Thank you. Great job you're doing. So we have a lot of that. We're getting down to a point we think probably over the next 2 or 3 months we'll be pretty much satisfied with the people that are working hard and want to be members of the administration and our country, really. And they're doing a lot of good people. We have a lot of great people. We want to keep the good ones, and we want to get rid of the ones that don't exist, and we want to get rid of the ones that do exist but don't work. And we have quite a few of them. Would anybody else like to say something before we take some questions from the press, please? Doug Collins.
Russia and Ukraine are exchanging deadly attacks at a time when U.S. is holding talks with both sides separately in Saudi Arabia. Kiev claims at least 65 people were injured in Russian attack in the Sumy region, and says that its railway traffic has not been disrupted by a cyber attack that knocked out its online ticketing system. Here's a report.
Russia is going full throttle in its onslaught, unleashing a devastating combination of missiles, drones and glide bombs on key Ukrainian cities with mechanical precision. Heavy aerial bombardment is transforming civilian landscapes into war zones and human suffering. The regions of Kyiv, Kharkiv, Sumy, Zaporizhia, Chernihiv, Odessa and Donetsk suffer intense Russian bombardments. Russian troops continue to make daily advances across eastern Ukraine. These are images from the front lines showing heavy Russian firepower. With infantry numbers decimated and morale fragile, Ukrainian troops are increasingly relying on aerial drones targeting Russian infantry. They are skeptical of any possible truce.
So far, these are just talks. There hasn't been any visible action. There has been no ceasefire. And I think that there will never be one from the Russian Federation because this is a country that has been at war for all its existence. It is probably in their DNA to go to war against a country.
Ukraine is also continuing its strikes on Russian territory. It has destroyed 2 Russian Ka-52 and 2 Mi-8 helicopters in missile strikes with a HIMARS rocket launcher in Belgorod Oblast. The region is regularly used by Russian forces to launch attacks on Ukrainian territory. The Ukrainian troops have blown up a gas pumping station on their retreat in the Kursk region. Moscow describes this as a violation of the moratorium on attacks on energy infrastructure. The deadly attacks come at a time when US holds negotiations with Russia and Ukraine separately in Saudi Arabia. While President Trump pushes for a swift resolution to the 3-year conflict, both sides have put forward different proposals for temporary ceasefires. Russia is pushing for a possible resumption of the Black Sea Initiative. It is working out on the terms with the US to halt on attacks on energy infrastructure. Moscow believes it has common understanding with the US on the need for settlement in Ukraine. However, it wants the US to address different aspects of the settlement. As the world watches, the fragility of this limited truce underscores the complexities of the Ukraine conflict. The path to lasting peace requires more than tentative agreements. It calls for a genuine commitment from all stakeholders to end the 3-year-long brutal war. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
And still on that, we earlier spoke to Jane Kinninmont, who is an acting director at the European Leadership Network, and this is what she told us.
US is the only one that can bridge the divide. At the end of the day, over the last 3 years, we have seen various attempts to mediate, including by Turkey, by Qatar, even Israel at one point offered to mediate before it became embroiled in its own problems closer to home. But when you have a conflict that involves 2 superpowers on different sides, there's no real force that can mediate. So, perhaps the US can. I think the issue is that now that the US has decided to start talking with Russia, at the same time, it seems to be burning its bridges with Ukraine. The envoy, Stephen Witkoff, has been speaking in a way that sounds so close to the Russian viewpoint that the Ukrainians are now very afraid. So what's going to happen to actually bring the sides together rather than seeming to move from one side to the other?
There's a reset brewing in Kabul between two bitter battlefield enemies, the Taliban and the United States. There's a lot of buzz around President Trump's approach. He doesn't brand regimes as enemies or friends. He simply sees a transaction. And looks like that approach may benefit the Taliban. Because reports say the US is thinking about reopening its Kabul embassy. If true, this would be massive. Like most countries, the US shut its Afghan embassy in 2021. That's when the Taliban captured power in Kabul. And since then, only a few have reopened. The likes of Pakistan, Russia, India, China, and Iran. But looks like Trump wants to do the same. And it's not an isolated move. It's part of a larger shift by the US government. Last week, an American delegation traveled to Kabul. It was led by Adam Boehler. He's a hostage negotiator at the White House. Also part of the team was Zalmay Khalilzad. He served as Trump's Afghan envoy in the first term. After 2021, he slipped into the shadows, but now he's back. Khalilzad and Boehler secured the release of an American jailed in Afghanistan. The US called it a constructive step, sort of like a goodwill measure. And what did the Taliban get in return? Perhaps some bounty relief. The Taliban's interior minister is Sirajuddin Haqqani. He heads the dreaded Haqqani network. It's a terror group / faction of the Taliban. Until recently, the US had a bounty for Haqqani, $10 million in exchange for a tip-off. But Kabul says that bounty has been lifted. The State Department website does not list it anymore, but the FBI website still does. So there's some confusion. Nonetheless, it's important. The Taliban clearly see an opening here, because they have dealt with Donald Trump before. In 2020, he negotiated America's withdrawal from Afghanistan. He also set the August 2021 deadline. That deal and that deadline led to the Taliban's comeback in Kabul. So Donald Trump is a known entity for them. Someone who does not look at ideals or values. Instead, he looks at strategy. It is the perfect chance for the Taliban to make inroads, to reduce their isolation. But what's in it for the US president? Mainly two things. One, a bulwark against the Islamic State. The US is betting that the Taliban will contain the terror threat. It's like asking the thief to guard the treasure. But Trump is risking it anyway. That is one thing. Second, to protect against Chinese advances. Beijing has built close ties to the Taliban. Last year, they recognized the group's ambassador to Beijing, the first ever country to do so, to recognize the Taliban ambassador. China is also eyeing Afghanistan's resources. They're valued at almost $1 trillion. This includes 1.4 million tons of rare earth minerals. In Afghanistan, 1.4 million tons, like lithium used for batteries. China is keen to mine and process these rare earths, and Donald Trump does not want to be left behind. I mean, he's mining Ukraine in the middle of a war, so I'm sure Afghanistan is not a problem for him. This engagement also has ramifications for the region, especially for Pakistan. Islamabad is trying to convince Trump that the Taliban are terror sponsors. And what does Trump do? Move closer to the very same Taliban. It's very different from the 1980s and the 1990s. Back then, Pakistan was the middleman between Washington and Kabul, but Trump wants to deal directly. And what about India? How does this outreach affect India? Well, New Delhi has been deploying the same logic. It has not embraced the Taliban regime, but it has accepted the ground reality in Afghanistan. Today, the Indian embassy is operational in Kabul. We do not have a full-fledged diplomatic team, but we do have a technical one. Beyond that, it's hard to draw conclusions. A stable Afghanistan is certainly in India's interest, but a powerful Taliban, perhaps not. We'll have to wait and see how far Trump goes, whether these small moves amount to a big reset.
2 weeks after US President Trump's letter to Iran seeking a new nuclear deal and a strong rebuttal from the Iranian Supreme Leader, there's no end to tensions between Tehran and Washington on the issue, with a fresh round of US warnings. Now, in the latest, the US has called for what it calls full dismantling of Iran nuclear programs, and it is ramping up a military campaign in the Middle East. In an interview with the CBS, White House National Security Advisor Mike Waltz said that Iran has to give up its nuclear program in a way that the entire world can see. Waltz said, and I quote, "It is time for Iran to walk away completely from its desire to have a nuclear weapon. He added that Tehran cannot be allowed to enrich or weaponize its nuclear and strategic missile programs. The White House National Security Advisor's latest remarks comes after US President Donald Trump warned Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei to withdraw the nuclear program or face possible military action in a letter earlier this month. Well, Walz echoed some of Trump's threats, warning Iran that it would face consequences if it did not give up its nuclear program completely.
Ebrahim Rasool, South Africa's former ambassador to the US, who was expelled by the Trump administration, returned home to a hero's welcome on Sunday. Hundreds of supporters gathered at Cape Town International Airport, singing songs of praise and surrounding him as he arrived with his wife.
We would have liked to come back with a welcome like this if we could report to you that we had turned away the lies of a white genocide in South Africa, but we did not succeed in America with that. We would have preferred to come here to say that we have won for you a goer, but we could not win it by withdrawing our case from the International Court of Justice against Israel, because as we stand here, the bombing has continued and the shooting has continued.
Rasool's expulsion followed controversial comments made in a webinar where he discussed US demographic shifts and accused the Trump administration of promoting racial division.
So we don't come here to say that we are anti-American or that we have no need for America or that we don't have ties with America. We come here even after being declared persona non grata. We still come here and say we must rebuild and we must reset the relationship with America, because our relationship with America over 50 years has not always been with the White House. It has sometimes been with Congress, and it has always been with the people of the United States of America.
Despite his expulsion, Rasool's message was clear. South Africa will continue to advocate for Palestine's rights and resist foreign influence whilst maintaining a dignified relationship with the US.
France is witnessing a massive wave of protests across several cities on the weekend against anti-Semitism. The protests were triggered following an attack on a rabbi in broad daylight, which shocked the Jewish community. The attack on the rabbi of Orleans, Ari Engelberg, happened when he was walking with his 9-year-old son from the synagogue located about 110 kilometers south of Paris on Saturday afternoon. Now, according to local media, the suspect hurled anti-Semitic insults at the rabbi before physically attacking the rabbi. France's Interior Ministry has confirmed the arrest of the suspect shortly after the assault and transferred him to a psychiatric facility.
J'étais à ma boutique, j'étais en train de ranger.
I was at my shop. I was tidying up my inventory. I am a locksmith craftsman. I heard noise. I peeked through the window. There I saw a rather violent action, an altercation. I had locked the door of my shop. I turned around, took the keys. I opened the shop, and there fight, so I directly intervened to separate them, quite simply.
Directement intervenu pour les séparer.
The incident sparked condemnation. More than 300 people gathered on Sunday to rally against anti-Semitism at the Place de la Bastille in Paris.
Les plus jeunes, pour la première fois depuis la Shoah, les générations les plus jeunes ont plus de préjugés antisémites que les générations anciennes. C'est un message d'urgence.
On est inquiet parce que.
We're worried because today we see that someone who is identified as Jewish in the street in France is targeted, and we wonder about certain political parties and certain political personalities who today are actually targeting Jews in France.
Sur les Juifs en France.
We want to show that we Jews are not afraid, and it's not because there's been this attack that we're going to hide. On the contrary, we're here, we're fighting anti-Semitism, and we also want to say that we're all fighting anti-Semitism together. Not just the Jewish community, but non-Jewish organizations too.
Et ce n'est pas parce qu'il y a eu cette agression que nous nous cacherons, au contraire.
Apart from Paris, similar protests were also witnessed in Lyon and Toulouse over the weekend. France has the largest Jewish population outside of Israel and the United States and has experienced a significant increase in assaults on Jewish people and property in the recent decades. Several European Union nations, including France, have reported a spike in anti-Semitism since the Gaza war started in October 2023. Condemning the attack on the rabbi, French President Emmanuel Macron on his social media post stated anti-Semitism is poisonous. He vowed not to give in to silence or inaction.
Let's